Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today's webinar is on the disruptions with ethylene oxide. And today we'll be sharing some ways on how we can be proactive in the event that you experience this impact and how you can mitigate these type of events. Before we get started, there are a couple of items we want to point out. Number one is everyone's on mute. Next, we also have a Q&A session after the presentation. So you'll notice that you have a Q&A box to the bottom right of your screen. Please feel free to type your questions in during the presentation, and then we'll try to address them afterwards. And last, the presentation will be available on the ResiliLink website after November 15th. Today's presenter is Graeme Dykes. He's the Managing Director of the Healthcare Transparency Initiative here at ResiliLink, and he'll be sharing his best practices with this topic. And with that, I'll pass it over to Graeme.
Thanks, Sophia. Fantastic. I believe that everyone can hear me now. Is that correct? Well, welcome to today, if I restart that, wherever you are located in the world and any of the time zones. Today is all about disruption in general, but specifically we're talking about some of the sterilization concerns that have occurred. And today we'll have three objectives, right? We want to learn about the issues and what are its current impacts. I hope we want to learn a little bit about improving the sensing and detecting of this in the future. And we also want to learn how to improve the transparency into the affected products and the resulting healthcare impacts. That's what we're going to try and unpack, and hopefully we will get there by the end, and feel free to write down some of your questions. I would probably suggest I'm going to move for about 20 minutes or so through this, and then we'll open up, and hopefully it'll be an informative session for you. All right, so quick agenda. We're going to learn a little bit about ResiliLink, a little bit about the healthcare transparency, and then get in. There are several on the call who don't know anything about us, so I do want to spend just a little bit of time there, and then go on to the ETO issue. So ResiliLink is what we consider ourselves the LinkedIn of the supply chain. We would like to consider ourselves, I think like most, as a leader in this world. And we're using a lot of AI, or artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing in understanding what the cognitive risks are in your supply chain. That is our goal, that is our mission, and that's what we've been providing to the market for about 10 years. So we would consider ourselves to be the largest repository of supply chain intelligence, which is looking at the sources of data. Like 50 million sources of information are being monitored on a daily basis, and all the deduplication and all of the natural language processing that goes on there, it is considered big data. We have about 80,000 suppliers mapped, millions of parts, etc., across multiple industries, and we'll dial this down a little bit into healthcare soon, in 135 countries. So the key part of what we do, and which is really where we're going to end today, is what we call multi-tier. Is how do we understand who is providing, who is manufacturing what products, and in this case, do we know which of those products are going or moving through a sterilization process before coming to us, almost like a third party to some degree in many instances. So do we have visibility into that? And in general, which is why we have Hurricane Maria issues with bags, which is why we have some of the glove issues or the potential issues, and then this is why we have some of the sterilization as well. The market is fairly tight in many instances, as we know through the number of recalls and shortages, and this kind of visibility is what really makes all the difference. Okay, it's AI powered, and we have some proprietary logic in there. So in general, again, we like to say that on the repository side, certainly in high tech, we have a very high mapping component of the supply chain already. We do know what sites are typically related to the supplier. And then we also know some of the downstream effects as well, as like where are they shipping to their customers. And so in the life science world, we're pretty well mapped. What we believe we're well mapped, medical devices and healthcare, of course, uses the life science med devices and pharma. So, you know, it just depends on the health system of where their supply chain is into what kind of mapping do we have. Now, I do want to be clear here, that doesn't mean we understand where all the products or all of the parts are that relate to those manufacturing sites. And that is what we endeavor to be stronger at. I do want to suggest to healthcare listeners today that the high-tech market is certainly a lot more advanced in the access to this type of information, to get this type of transparency in order for us not only to collaborate more with our suppliers, but also to engage the entire market to mitigate. Because at the end of the day, everyone's mission here is patient care and reducing the impact to patient care. And this is a challenge in healthcare today. I believe there was a study that said about 70% of hospitals experience supply chain originated delay in surgery or just in general patient care. So it's a significant issue, and when you have major issues, it's literally billions of dollars are spent in wasted effort, time, resource, dollars, freight forwarding, or expedited freight premiums, etc. So that's just a tiny bit on Resolink. Let me move to the HTI, or the Healthcare Transparency Initiative. You can go to our website, and this will be available afterwards. It's at healthcare.resolink.com. And as we studied the healthcare market particularly, we have a lot of customers, being the Amgens, Biogen, Boston Scientific, even BD, and a lot of other customers on board with our product on the supplier side, from med device, biotech, pharma, etc. And these people are all monitoring and measuring and reducing their risk and making a more agile and resilient supply chain. But when we looked at the healthcare side of the equation, more the health system side, IDN, we started to find that they didn't have the consummate information available to them on the disruption, nor are they generally resourced appropriately for that, because as we know, most dollars go to the clinical side of the business and into the patient care. So being able to absorb information, understand information, make changes quick enough to meet the complexity of the global supply chain today is very difficult and needs technology to support it. So we created this initiative to bring everyone together. This is the health systems, the GPOs, the distributors, the suppliers, and the sub-tier, so that we will have some kind of data parity. And so what we have is in the complexity here, we have our suppliers in the sub-tier who obviously are moving product into the suppliers for a manufacturing or an assembly or through some kind of processing. The manufacturers oftentimes are reselling or distributing through this channel, and obviously the GPOs, the contracting agency, and providing a lot of value-added services to these providers. That's fine. But in general, when there's disruption in the sub-tier, information moves here, then information moves there, then information moves here, and this could take 2 or 3 weeks, could take an hour. It just depends. It's very variable. And in the case of, I believe, the Sterigenics side, we actually were the initiator, not only for the provider, but for actually some of the GPOs too, that this is a problem, and we need to look at this. So what we've done is we've said, well, you can imagine the complexity of this globally. And when I've got 8,000 providers or about 1,000 health systems, and I've got even more suppliers and even more tens of thousands of sub-tiers, how do I get visibility into this? And how do I communicate effectively through all this? So we created an ecosystem which lives across all of these different levels. And the ecosystem is trying to build this data repository of not only the manufacturing, but also the products that are being manufactured, moved through the port, access, maybe it's an API, maybe it's an excipient, where is this information flowing from and to? And then what we can do is the ecosystem allows for the sharing of data, super confidentially, of course, and with permissions. And now, once we've collected the data, we can share this information with providers or distributors based on the supplier's full control of that. So we're engaging the whole industry, and we're trying to make this affordable for all, because access to this data, as we know, is just difficult. It's difficult to get, and there's lots of proprietary information. So we want to increase the visibility. We want to bring data parity. So if there is an issue, for instance, the recent ETO, the providers know immediately, all our customers do anyway, our distributor customers do know, the suppliers know as well. So we all know what is happening, and we can all work from the same information and all work together to mitigate. This creates dependability, consistency when you're getting accurate, timely, and relevant data, only relevant to your supply chain and what potentially will impact it. Share the cost and reduce redundancy. Reduce waste. That's the opportunity for change that we're trying to bring, and I hope you'll see that this does have an effect in the ETO. So let me just go back and start, which most of you do know. A while ago, we did have an issue. We do have some white papers on there. And it's not. We know there was a Sterigenics issue, and which happened really in about March-ish timeframe. But we were notifying clients back in September, 6 months ahead of time, and there were some of the notifications, there were personal lawsuits, there are all sorts of issues that came, and you'll notice that the severity goes from a green to a medium, and then on, and we can understand what products were affected there if we know what products are obviously being sterilized, which is the magic source, of course. So I just want to let you know that in these cases, this is what we do, and this is how we notify, and this is how we keep people in front of the issues. Also, what people don't realize is that just in ethylene oxide, which is very similar to what we did with rare earth minerals, it's what we do for tariffs in China, it's what we do all over the world for our clients, is understand what other market news is happening, right? So M&A is actually the #1 event in healthcare that affects supply chain. What is going to happen when health systems merge? Then what is let alone when our suppliers are merging or they're divesting out of Italy or this? What is happening? Who's going to be the winner? Is my supply chain affected? So there's M&A consolidation. Here's some spill related to ethylene oxide fire, feedstock shortages, and on and on. So when you start to try to interpret this data, hopefully you're getting a much more proactive look and proactive view into your supply chain. So, recently, of course, what it is, again, there was an FDA warning that came out, and then there was the Covington issue recently, and city officials. So as you can see, it goes from low to medium, and we start to try to understand for each of the suppliers what their potential impact would be, and create the relative risk here. I do want to say that I know BD was very proactive through this process, and we're able to do the settlement and provide and get basically, get back on track as fast as they could. But still, that left a lot of questions, right? What do I have sterilized there? What is coming? What is not coming? So what we've done, again, is we've started to understand, and we're asked to understand by our clients, where else are the sterilization locations? And so think of this from the proactive side of understanding. So we did map, and we can see we've got whatever that is, 200 potential sites in the US, Europe, and some Northeast, well, not the Northeast, sort of Middle East, and on the East as well. So these are potential areas that are accessible to our, let me go back up one again, to our clients. So now our clients are starting to say to us, well, listen, as we look at key and core and high risk items that are must-haves, sort of the top 100 must-haves almost for hospital operations, can you basically understand what the risks are around the world? And so this is a very ugly slide. I will warn you, forgive me. But so we start, this is what we're asked to do, is Graeme, can you tell me if I move my sterilization to another area, what are the hazards related to that? And we can. And we can look across human health and the company splits, legal, bankruptcy. I just highlighted a few, regulatory change. Are there regulations in Europe that ethylene oxide is subject to? Are we looking at the CAS number? Is there anything being enforced? Are there enforcements against it? Have there been fines and recalls, leaks, environmental spills? What has happened? What are there port disruptions in the area? Is this manufacturing location subject to extreme weather? Can you tell me what the risks are from that perspective, from a force majeure, whether it's any of these potential event types and subtypes? And through all that, we can start to create profiles for everyone. And the profiles come in many different benchmark forms, right? We can create scores based on actual artificial intelligence and static data being more of the where is the plant located. The dynamic data is more of the what's the macroeconomic risk, which is changing in China right now, as you know. And is there transparency in the market? Is there access to data in the market? Is there response from the client? So these are all dynamic issues which affect your score. And now we can start to create these diagnostic and benchmark and insight report, which is the real, really beneficial one, is to really understand what your product impact is potentially going to be. So this is more forward-looking for you, and I just want to let you know that. But I am telling you that this is what data is available to you or to customers today. These are possibilities that you can extract from the database. And this, of course, helps you to analyze what the average resiliency risk are, and forget about these names, and start to plot and map which sites are the most riskiest. And this can be across your supply chain, not just ETO. This is across everywhere. And this is what a lot of our clients get today. And they understand business impact and versus risk of a particular client. Okay, so in order for us or for the market to improve the consistency of supply, there are a few things that we do recommend for everyone. That is, you have to understand and map your supply chain. So do you know who you buy from? Of course you do. I can pull your PO history and order and load it into our system very easily. That's not the difficulty, right? We all know that. The issue is if I buy a stent, or if I'm buying any item that is necessary in my OR, do I understand where that product is actually manufactured? And then do I understand where its piece parts are manufactured? And do I have visibility into that? So most health systems I speak to don't or have very limited information with that. We call it mapping the genome. And that does take some time, which is what what I showed you before, is trying to accelerate that and understand that and what is available. Not only down to the piece part level, but which is your sub-tier, second tier, third tier. And then what we can do is we can much more accurately predict the potential impact of a disruption. And then hopefully for, starting with your must-haves, you're able to start putting together a mitigation plan way before any of this happened. We have some great studies out there of Biogen who have zero impact from Hurricane Maria. And being able to understand what products were manufactured on the island, which components were manufactured by other manufacturers there, move it to another location and actually have zero impact. So there are lots of great analysis, but it all comes back to what are the parts and products and where are they manufactured and what are they risks are they subject to. And as I said, as the supply chain becomes more globally distributed, this becomes a major, major issue, which is why we're always in reactive mode instead of proactive. So I'm not really talking about the mitigation, like what do we do once we know. This is more a how do we know, how fast do we know where alternates are, how do I respond, and can I communicate with my suppliers? So this is the second piece, is we need to monitor what's happening in our suppliers and our suppliers. So I mentioned some names of some fantastic companies before. They're all using it to monitor their own supply chain. And that benefits the whole market, because if the health systems know that they buy from a major supplier who is monitoring their supply chain down to the second or third tier, that gives potentially a health system a 4-tier visibility. And that starts to raise the overall resiliency level of the entire market, whilst also benefiting you individually, which is the missional aspect of HTI. That's what the board and that's what everyone is driving to, is to create a standard that allows this. And then the third thing I think I really want to say to you is on the collaboration during the events, right? So it's one thing to be able to be notified of this, but the next thing is, am I communicating with our suppliers? And through our system, even through the 2 sterilization issues that happened, our customers were being communicated to. So the health systems were communicating with others over our system to say what the impact was. And this is the benefit of the tool, is the collaboration and direct collaboration to know if there's impact or if there's not impact. And hopefully, which is the future state, exactly which products. So we do allow for this collaboration, and and that we do have actual opportunity there to load in inventory data if that is available, to a little bit to understand. So what is the potential impact there? If it's a week-long impact, do I have enough? Do I have enough to cover? And if not, I can start to trigger some of my alternates. My alternate sites from that, or alternate product purchases, or just collaborate directly with your distributor. So I was going to leave it there kind of from the discussional aspect there. We do have, these are the 3 things we believe you have to do. It seems pretty simple, but I am going to go off a little bit into saying, just into the product a little bit, to say, in many instances, what people want to know is what's happening around the world to any and all of my supply chain. And I can map the genome. This is what it looks like. In here, a lot of ETO sites as well. But it looks like, where are all the sites that I'm buying from, or my locations or ports or anything that I'm looking to map and monitor in the system. So being able to know that gives you visibility and concentration of risks. And what I'm able to do is I'm able to look at my different tiers. I'm able to look at my different event types. I'm able to filter out by any of these, a cyber attack or ETO. In this case, it was under chemical and environmental. Who are my partners? What types of partners are there? And these could be third parties, of course, or 3PL, contract manufacturers, etc. I can start to filter this. So please don't think of it as dots on a map. This is really the visibility and transparency you're looking for. And then what I start to do is I start to overlay the the events that are happening around the world that are specific to my site. So whether these could be recalls, they could be M&A events, they could be anything. And then I start to understand by clicking on any of these, I start to understand what the issue was. So, here is a med device recall. I understand everything that's happening, all the different sites that are affected or in my supply chain. But in 4 seconds, literally, I can understand that I got 36 sites and 453 products and probably 4.5 million potentially at risk, or that could be a patient care index as well. We are emailing you a little bit about this. Here's here's the FDA's report, and we link directly to all the products that are affected there. And this is where it starts to get interesting, is that in a second, and I can't show you actual data, of course, because of confidentiality. So this is, all fake as it relates to ETO, but I can understand all my different partners that are involved in this potential impact. I know all the potential sites. And during this, the actual suppliers can come in and tell us whether they confirmed impact, what's the duration. And if they're alternates and I know them, they'll be pieced in here as I showed earlier. And then which are the products that are affected. And I just want to spend a little bit of time on the products, because one of the questions that gets asked all the time is, Graeme, do you know everything that's manufactured at these sites? And I don't want to mention names because these are all friends, but the answer is, do you know what's happening at this facility, what's manufactured there? And that's very difficult to find out. So we do know that information in some instances through public domain, and we can put that in your system for you. However, the mechanisms we do to understand this information are threefold. The first is you give us the information and what you know. The second is we pull public domain information and we try and find that. And the third thing is we actually go to the supplier and ask them, for example, which products that you supply to us move through the sterilization process? And is that part of your material flow? And the answers will come back and say, yes, it is. These are the products, et cetera, et cetera. Now we know exactly which products are associated with which sites. So now when there's a potential impact like this, I start to understand immediately what that impact is. And that is the direct impact of my product. And that's what the Healthcare Transparency Initiative is. It's trying to crowdsource this information and in a super confidential way, and the sharing of that information so that health systems or even suppliers to their own supply chain are doing this on a daily basis inside our system, is obtaining this information and then being able to load up which products they use from a particular supply and being able to map that very easily, or relatively really easily, against where it's manufactured to be able to tell you exactly what the impact is. So there's no magic pill here, please, and I want to make sure everyone on the phone knows that. There's no one single entity that has any of this data, but we do have hundreds of thousands of parts already mapped in our system. We do have tens of thousands of sites mapped in our system, and we are really starting to roll in being able to access this data on an aggregate level and share this. So it would literally take me 4 seconds to generate this report and understand exactly what my problem is and start to filter by revenue exposure, downtime, number of parts, sites, timeline, etc. Now, again, that's the quick way to do this, right? Now, I showed you notifications specifically for Sterigenics and Covington issue recently. So these would generate these exact screens for you. But now I can start looking at a particular category. For instance, if I look at stent valves, it's going to show me all the different events that have been, that are affecting my category and my products. And you'll notice that there are recalls here all over. There's typhoons, there's earthquakes. There are multiple different issues or events that are potentially impacting my stents or my category. I also can know who my category partners are. And again, this is all fake data, just so you're seeing names that you might recognize, fake data. I know my partner contacts, and I can email them directly from the system right here and there. And as you can see all this, I can start to understand all the sites that are manufacturing these stents or that are just associated with the potential supplier. And it still starts to tell a story, doesn't it? Here are all the part numbers that are available to me. Here are any mitigation projects that I have. Here are some of the part numbers that I'm buying, whether it's partner part number, we can store GTIN and UDI, et cetera, and here are all the products that are being supplied to me by my distributor, reseller, supplier, direct, whoever is your tier 1 or your tier 2 in this case. So hopefully that starts to tell a story. Now being able to drill in even further and start to understand what is my partner risk score, what's their trend, what's their risk breakdown, what's their site resiliency risk, and I can start understanding a lot of information about my suppliers and start to obtain this information, exactly which products that I'm purchasing are being supplied. These are mapped to the sites, so I know exactly where, if any issue is occurring, where the product is. I can then look at the network and to say where are they located, just for stents, right? In any particular case by a category or a product. And then I can look at where these are located, and again, where the partner sites are, and again into their sub-tier. And this is a very simple sub-tier, but I can start, so there's my tier 1, and here are the tier 2s that are supplying them piece parts or parts that go into the manufacturing process of the stent, in this case, right? Or these are going in through my ethylene oxide process, okay? And I can start to understand all of this in one place. Then, of course, I can benchmark people. I can benchmark these to understand which ethylene oxide, if I need to dual source or single source, or I just need a closer relationship with my supplier. These are all pieces of data that I can now start to understand. So I hope that was helpful a little bit. So I did move off some of the ETO, but I did that on purpose because some of the, we don't know all of the products that are manufactured specifically at Covington or any of the sterilization sites, but I do know that there was a shutdown in Atlanta with another sterilization company recently, or relatively recently, just for preventative and to do air quality tests, right? Did you know that? Is there a trend happening here? Do I understand if there are any challenges to the operations of a manufacturing facility in any of your product line? So I hope that was helpful. And Sophia, I think at this point I'm just going to stop and just see if there are any questions. I can answer a few, and then we can call it a day.
Sounds great. Okay, we do have a couple of questions that came in. The first one is, how often is your data updated?
Fair question. In general, how do I answer that? In general, our customers ask us to refresh on an annual basis. That's a general statement. We do have customers who want to do it on a quarterly basis, but there's no specific timeline for that, right? So if we want to understand which products are still being manufactured at this particular site, going through the sterilization site, that can be on any frequency you determine, but it just requires the collaboration between the customer and, in this case, the supplier, to the willingness to be able to provide that data. And the good news is that we are making significant strides there to obtain that information, which is what the HTI is. But that in general is the refresh rate. And it's and ultimately, what we want to get to is any supplier, anyone can publish directly to the system. And we actually do have, I think I can say it's Amgen, who is actually proactively puts their data in our system, where their manufacturing sites are, which products are manufactured there, what's their business continuity plan, what's their bring up time, recovery time. All this is now being proactively put onto our network, and that will brings the level of transparency significantly up. And if that changes, they changing it so it's always evergreen, right? And that's the beauty of it, is that we don't have to go on this push-pull all the time. People are willing to do this because the relationships are strong between supplier and health system, but sometimes the data isn't available when I need it, and that's what we're trying to address.
Thank you, Graeme. There is another one. It is, how quickly will a healthcare system know of an event?
So in general, it's, I think, well, there's no straight answer to that one. I think for something like an earthquake, I think it's within 20 minutes, and it's normally way before that. So typically, by the time we are processing the data in order to sending the notifications out, it's hard to tell you the average, but it's normally within minutes. It's not hours. And so we do offer ourselves some grace there, and it just depends if it's significant or it's just industry news. So for example, an M&A event is not necessarily going to drive an issue like a recall notice or an ETO issue. So generally those are minutes, and the notification of the M&A is normally on a daily basis or some frequency which our customers can set. And that's not just the notification of something happened, remember, it's actually the notification of the impact and the impact analysis, which will tell you you've got 46 products affected. Here is my recovery time, and here is, and then you can basically move through the mitigation process, which you can do in our system as well. So I think it was what is the time frame? So generally, I think with these notifications, it's normally minutes or within 30 minutes, as opposed to a daily one, which is more industry news. So it does depend, and remember we got 55 event types, so it does differ by event type.
Great, thank you, Graeme. So far, those are the questions we have. I'll just give everyone another moment to see if there's any more. In the meantime, Graeme, thank you for that presentation. It was very informative, and especially your best practices for mitigating these types of events.
Yes, and I just want to, I do want to say is that there's no magic pill, right? What we're doing is making this easier for people to be proactive on the front end, to be predictive, to understand if there are things happening now which is obviously going to affect this facility later. There is this ability today. We do have some data, not all data. So we are building, and the HTI is there to crowdsource this and make this a lot easier. And I do understand the pain, because people ask us, do you know what all my products that are manufactured at this facility? We can't know that, but I do have the ability to do that. I do have the ability to take your products, bounce it off what we know, and then we're also acquiring more and more data from our clients, and that transparency, what do you call it, gate or wall, is being broken down, which is fantastic. And we're seeing a lot more sharing, and there are some great companies out there that are doing this. And I think the more and more the market can come together and collaborate and communicate in community, that is simple, a vision, but really is ultimately where we need to move this if we're not going to have billions of dollars in wasted resource and time trying to understand what the problem is. And we're all in mitigation together, and those will build stronger supplier-customer relationships, evidenced everywhere else in the world, evidenced in healthcare, but I would hesitate to say that we still have a way to go in healthcare. And I just want to say the companies that are affected in this sterilization are first-class, world-class companies. We have relationships with some, and I just want to let you know that there's a lot of efforts underway. The amount of work that goes into communicating with the market and being able to bring up these facilities in order to reduce this time frame has been extreme, and I appreciate that, and so I applaud them. What we're just trying to do is work on the data side, on the predictive side, on the AI side, in order to help healthcare and the suppliers build a resilient supply chain, and that is going to increase the ultimate level of the industry's resilience and agility. That will bring peace and harmony. That was a long close, wasn't it, Sophia? So thank you for...
Yes, it was, but it was awesome. Thank you, Graeme. Well, that wraps up our presentation for today. As I mentioned earlier, the recording will be available on our website after November 15th. If you have any questions from here until then, please contact your customer success manager. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.